Yo, what is up, everybody? John from Tau Tactics here, bringing you another video. You may have noticed, if you've been paying attention to MetaWatch Monday or StatCheck, that Tau's win rate has been dwindling over the past few weeks. So today we're going to go on a little bit of a rant. We're going to talk about why Tau's struggling and discuss some of the buffs that could be implemented that I think would help Tau be much more competitive as a faction moving forward. Let's get right into it. Okay, so what do I think is holding Tau back right now? So first and foremost, reliable primary scoring and denial. That's really why I'm playing Ox Cadre, because I think there's a niche there that fits kind of what Tau needs from a scoring perspective. But you look around the meta today, and the other fragile shooting armies like Eldar, for example, have a really good way of still attacking staging runes. They have things like Howling Banshees that advance and charge, go through walls, and fights first, so they can then stage themselves there. They have like Warp Spiders, for example, that can run through walls and ignore Overwatch. We really just have Breachers, essentially, which obviously just T3 dudes who get blown away by any decent Overwatch within the game. And same thing with holding primary, right? We need to, in my experience, aggressively screen our opponents, like just strictly give up a unit of Pathfinders, for example, to create distance from your natural expansion to your opponent, lose that screen for free, and then score primary that way. We don't really have a way to put tough things on objectives, save for maybe ghost kills, and reliably hold primary. Next, I think is really frustrating when you kind of look at like the breadth of rules within the Tau Codex, is just conditional rules. So, for example, obviously Monka and Kauyan, being able like your opponent knowing when your rules turn on and off, and some of your strongest strats in each detachment being tied to when your rules turn on and off, feels extremely punishing. I know talking to newer players within the Tau community, they've mentioned one person specifically, Cryotin, in my Discord, mentioned that he feels like his opponent's playing mini golf and we're playing actual golf. An example would be the strat for +1 a wound in Kauyan only gets turned on turns 3, 4, and 5. Same thing with extra AP. Extra AP in Monka, right? These are all things that do not have to be conditional, and in addition, just the army rule in general. So, I think we're the only army that has a 6-inch deep strike that's 2 CP, which feels terrible. Because I think, again, in order for us to attack staging points, we need to be able to leverage that strat a lot in Retaliation Cadre. And then last but not least, the guiding mechanic just runs completely counter to what Tau's playstyle should be, which is efficient trading, because we play with a lot of units, so we should be able to trade efficiently, but as we commit damage dealers, we also have to commit our trading units at the same time. And it also just makes it not super new player friendly, because you have that added mechanic of having to line up your guides to ensure that your damage dealers are efficient. One other thing that I wanted to call out, which I think is an area that's pretty frustrating as a Tau player, is my opponents consistently play more strats than I do. I think the CP generation within Tau is really weak. When you look elsewhere, there are tons of armies within the game that just automatically get an extra CP. Think like Tyranids, Marines. It's all over the game, right? Where I feel like my opponents, free strats within Custodes that I was playing recently, just pressing as many strats as possible. So our strats are conditional, and also we use less of them. They're more expensive, and we don't really have a reliable way to leverage our economy. Ethereals aren't super effective. They're very swingy. And Farsight just is not efficient for his points, in my opinion. As much as I want to play him, getting to spend a CP every turn in exchange for losing damage isn't a fair trade, in my personal opinion. All right, so what should GW actually do about this? So they can keep applying points drops, but at a certain point, I think we've reached this point. It'll make Tau into something of a horde army, and I don't really think GW is aiming for that. So let's talk about some buffs that we could, potentially see coming into the army. So first and foremost, from a CP generation perspective, there are a lot of units in the game, like I can think of, Grots, for example, or GSC has a unit, I believe, Acolytes, where they stand on an objective. On a 4-up, they get a CP. So maybe adding that as an option for like strike teams, for example, or Farsight and Shadow Sun being +1 CP per player turn would be much more palatable than you get to spend a strat on Farsight's unit once per turn. Next would be like from a durability perspective. I think you look across the game. There are plenty of units right now that are similarly costed to Crisis suits that like model-wise look a similar height or even sometimes smaller that are T6, T7. I think bumping Crisis suits to T6, broadsides to T7, riptides to T10 is all super reasonable. Obviously, the Tau community has been harping on it a lot, but I think one really easy change, I don't know how much of an impact it'll have, but it'll at least make it less of a headache to play Tau, is changing the split fire penalty. So at least there will be situations where we can be a little bit more efficient when we're use our cool units, right? Like actually use the Storm Surge, try out the Taunar, because those units have a variety of different weapons and they all want to go into different targets, and so leveraging those units is just a feels bad because you're shooting, your 4 big guns into something hitting on 3s, and everything else, the 30 other shots are all hitting on 5s elsewhere, with no real benefits, no Kalyan, benefits, no Monka, etc. Lastly, like less restrictions on detachments. So the two that I'm thinking of are Kalyan and Monka. I think giving Kalyan sustained 1 might sound scary to the average player who has PTSD from 9th edition Tau. But I think that sustained 1 in Kalyan, I don't believe would actually be super overpowered. And then in Monka, just giving us assault for the entire game, I think would go an absolute long way. Lastly, Retaliation Cadre, you need to change the 6-inch to 1 CP. I have no idea why they decided that Tau needed to be the one army that had a 2-inch deep strike, a 6-inch deep strike for 2 CP. The footprint on the unit is huge, so it's still really easy to block out. I don't understand why we didn't get that change along with the rest of the armies in the game. Then lastly, I think another unit that should be in line with all the other replications of this within other armies is the Sunforge unit. So think about Eradicators. They get hit wound damage rerolls. Think about the, forgive me for not remembering, but the Eldari unit also gets hit wound damage rerolls. Why don't Sunforge have hit wound and damage rerolls already? So I think taking a look at the data sheets, looking at opportunities to bump Tau in line with other armies, I think we've been a victim of power creep across, as new detachments and codexes have released, and Tau has kind of fallen behind. And I do think it's time for GW to make take serious looks at the rules of Tau, not the points. One other one I did want to call out was Riptides to Strength 10. I think it's a pretty big break point for them, being able to actually reliably pop things like transports, light vehicles. You look at that thing's gun, it should be able to take out a T9 vehicle with ease. That's going to do it for today's video. Thanks for checking it out, folks. Would be really curious to get your thoughts on any changes you might make to Tau. I know in our Discord we've had a bunch of newer players join recently who've been really frustrated with the playstyle. So what we've been doing is for every new channel patron, I'm playing a TTS game with you personally. This is going to be a limited time thing until obviously the channel continues to grow. Also, I'm uploading my TTS games, practice games. Most recently, I've played 18 Rampager Auxiliary Cadre, so if you want to see me one-shot an ACDC brick and do 10 Mortals on the Charge, definitely check that out. Patreon is listed down below. Thanks as always to the channel patrons for the support, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.